Welcome to the Pigskin Playoff Special here on the All-OH.Report. I am your host, Brian Skowronski. We're going to dive into Week 13 where we still have 2 Richland County schools playing, plus our adopted local team, East Knox. But before we do that, let's meet the boys here. Again, Erik Will joining us along with Effie James, and from the Richland Source, we've got Curt Conrad. And we're going to break down, like I said, the playoffs that we've seen up to this point. But before we do, let's get your guys' thoughts on the teams that have not made it to Week 13 and or some players. Who are some guys that, that you're going to remember from this past season that really stood out to you?
For me, I thought Galleon had a tremendous year, even though they fell a little bit short in the MOAC title race. I thought that they had a fantastic year with outstanding play at the quarterback play and the wide receiver play. Their skilled positions were off the chart. I also, just Worcester winning the league title for the OCC, I thought was fantastic. Coach Haas, great job there. And then I'd say probably the biggest rebound team, the team that I thought got the most at the end of the year, was Ashland. For them to play for a conference title Week 10, phenomenal.
I would agree with you. Yeah, Ashland doing what they did after the start, that was pretty impressive stuff.
Yeah, Ashland came right to my mind right away, what they were able to do after that tough start. And they really showed a lot of fight coming back and then challenging for a league title. That was huge for them. I also liked the play of Mitch Heilman as a quarterback at Ashland. Really impressed me all year. He was one of those quarterbacks and players that improved week in and week out. You saw him being a steady hand. Even when they struggled some games, he played well. He kept his turnovers low. When they started to win, his turnovers were low. When they lost, his turnovers were high. So he was a guy that really stood out to me. Obviously, we had some great teams, but McGuire Albert at Shelby really impressed me with his growth. I mean, and I guess I'm looking at the quarterbacks, but still, he really impressed me with the way he led his team this year. And, they came a little bit short last week, but still, I thought he really was impressive the way he led his team throwing the football and even running the football when he had to. So I was impressed with him.
I thought some of that was a little bit unfortunate. Actually, I talked to some kids from Shelby last week on the sideline where they thought the first half of that game against Clyde was the best McGuire Albert had played all season. Yeah. And then the second half, he did not play so well, and kind of, the 28 unanswered points where Shelby couldn't score. But I agree. I really like what we saw from him. Yeah. What about you, Curt?
I'll champion the small schools. Ashland Crestview made the playoffs this year for the first time in a long time. Mm-hmm. Hillsdale was back in the playoffs. That one holds a special place in my heart. I'm a Hillsdale graduate. When I went there, the football was not good. Tom Williams changed that all around. He not just resurrected a program, he kind of built that program. Right. And for them, considering everything that they lost off that team last year, that includes a guy who's a walk-on at Marshall University right now, to get to the second round of the playoffs, and to do that with they lost their starting quarterback in Week 7. So they were doing that with a second quarterback, and to get to the second round, that's quite an impressive feat.
Yeah, I would agree. So the 2 teams that we still got playing from Richland County, we got the Lucas Cubs, a number 2 seed, and then also the Mansfield Tigers, a number 2 seed. And we all agreed on the show that these were the 2 teams that we had the most faith in getting to this regional championship portion of the playoffs. So they've done just that. Now that they are at this place, guys, let's talk about Mansfield first. Took down number 7 Bay. I thought that was a very impressive win, 28-0 out of the gates. And then last week, I thought they looked even better in the win over Holy Name, 45-30. What is it about this Tiger teams that you guys have seen collectively for the entire team that makes them special, that's gotten them to this point where they're playing probably about the best football that they have all season?
I'll tell you what I think, Brian. It is 2 words: leadership and weaponry. Okay, if that makes sense. Their weapons on this team on both sides of the football are unmatched in this area. I think they have playmakers on both sides of the ball. They have great leadership amongst their senior class. And as Coach Bradley and his staff has done a great job, but the fact that those kids go out and play for each other is much more effective than what any coach can do. And you can tell when you go in the locker room, you talk to them, you can tell they play for each other. And the leadership and experience on that team really sets them apart beyond the fact that they got extremely talented kids as well.
Which obviously is the number 1 factor, all the talent, but you got to give the coaching staff all the credit for harnessing that and making sure that we got the full potential.
Oh, absolutely.
I've covered senior high since the fall of 2000, so better part of 20 years. This is the best collection of interior defensive linemen. Right. I mean, it's fascinating how good those are. There was a time, and Scott Valentine figured it out over at Ashland, that you can't get the edge against senior high. You're not gonna get to the perimeter. So he was just gonna pound it. Teams try to do that now, and it doesn't work anymore.
Right. Yeah. When I look at them, they're looking at this from a coach's perspective. Coach Bradley has done such a great job because it's exactly what you're saying. One of the hardest things to do is get a bunch of guys with a lot of talent to buy into a team concept when there's a lot of individual accolades. We look at the all-district team came out and there's a whole bunch of Mansfield senior players on there. You got the all-league things, and those things are a result of team success. But right now they are playing each and every week because the awards are kind of the hay's in the barn, as they would say. The individual accolades are coming to an end. Right now these guys just don't want their season to end.
Right. Yeah.
So they're continuing to play because each week gives them an opportunity to come together, eat more team meals, be together as a collective group. They're not ready to go to those winter sports yet or train for those spring sports. So as long as they keep that mentality, they're going to be in great shape. But to directly answer your question, I think their defense is what sets them apart. They are so good defensively. I don't care who they play in the state, they're going to have a chance to win. So the biggest development that I've seen through the first game I was able to cover them, which was the Sandusky game, to now, is their offensive progression has just continued to improve. The playmakers, they have a true identity now on offense. They know who they are, they know who they need to get the ball to, and they're very, very tough to beat. I think it's going to be tough on Friday night for Sandusky.
I couldn't agree more, Erik. And obviously, I think it's the intelligence of this team that really stands out to me when you watch them on the field. And the coaching staff, too. I sat around and I was waiting for some interviews yesterday or 2 days ago, and to see how well the coaches are prepared before practice, all of them, it looked like they were studying for a midterm exam. It was really impressive to see how locked in they were, like on a Tuesday afternoon.
And that comes from the top.
Right.
I mean, that comes from Coach Bradley. So when you're seeing those assistants doing that, it's because when they come in, they're answering to the main guy. They're going to answer to Coach Bradley. And Coach Bradley has a very specific way that he wants things done. He knows the recipe to win football games and be successful. So that's awesome to hear.
Yeah, they're doing it right now. Certainly, Tigers got the juice. As you can see here, we got the cool T-shirts going on right now, guys. These are custom tees, the first ever All-OH.Report tee. We are giving 50% of all the proceeds for these to the Tigers football team. So if you guys want to represent, show the love for the TY Tigers, hit us up with an order on the Facebook.
Nice.
All right, let's talk about the Lucas Cubs now, because this team is fascinating to me. I didn't think they were going to be very good this year, just to be honest. I thought they'd get like 5 or 6 wins and maybe flirt with the playoffs. So the fact they're the number 2 seed out there in Region 25, and they got a little bit of a scare against McDonald. They had to survive that overtime game in Week 11. But to get to this point, Curt, how have they done it, man? What's Coach Spittler got in the water out there?
Oh, I tell you, I covered their game against St. Thomas Aquinas this past week, and F, I told you this last night. I've never seen the St. Thomas Aquinas team. They didn't want to be physical with that team anymore. I mean, Lucas actually took their will to be physical. It seemed like. I mean, you could almost sense it. That Tommy Zerza would break into the second level again, and the defensive backs, the linebackers, they just were hoping someone would block him because they didn't want to have to tackle that kid anymore, and they couldn't. And it was stunning to see a team have its will taken away from it. And I think that, and talking to Scott Spittler afterwards, I mean, he says we want to impose our will and control the line of scrimmage, and that's a pretty successful recipe.
And they did exactly that in that game. They didn't even attempt a pass. When I got the stats sent to me after the game, I thought maybe they left something out because of what Tommy Zerzo was able to do in getting to that second level. Exactly what you just laid out. They didn't even have to attempt a pass. And now they're playing for regional championship. Why do you think they're there now?
Well, I hate to go back to quarterbacks, but Logan Nicewander was a difference maker for this team. And even last year he played well, but this year he became a guy that the threat of the pass, even though they didn't pass, the fact that he had weapons like Hogger on the outside, and he could throw a deep ball, even makes the offensive domination even harder to defend. And I thought Logan Nicewander brought a lot of leadership to this team. I'm still amazed when I watch them run pitch sweep, and he's a lead blocker. That amazes me. So he is the identity of that football team. He's a tough kid, plays both sides of the ball. He rarely comes out of the football game. And, that type of leadership, he is the identity of what Lucas football is all about. He and Tommy really you see Lucas football. Tough kids that want to win.
For me, it's Coach Spittler. There's no doubt about it. Those kids expect to win football games. I mean, it's that simple. Well, people in the media, we generally look at the analytics. We're saying, well, this kid graduated, this kid's gone, this kid's gone. So, man, where's all this offense and defensive production? Whereas they just kind of have a system that just moves the next guy in. You just haven't heard of the name yet, or it's a name that you've heard of, but now it's going to take over and it's ready to star.
Right.
And that's what you have with this group. And I like what you were talking about, Curt, because I think that this offense and defense, they fit well. Sometimes you have offense and defensive schemes that don't mesh. Mm-hmm. And they do. So they know exactly who they are, what they're trying to do, what they're trying to get accomplished, and they physically want to take people's souls. Right. And they do it more than they don't. And you can see it. I love how you were talking about that, because you can see when a team, Urban Meyer used to say all the time, you can inevitably see someone tap out.
Yeah. Right.
And you saw that last Saturday night. And I'll tell you what, I'm really excited for this week's game, because I think both teams are going to be throwing haymakers.
Yeah.
So Scott Spittler named the Division 7 District Coach of the Year, as well as Choki Bradley for Division 3. Mm-hmm. So tough question, my friends, but which coach, in your opinion, did the better job this season to get their team to where they're at?
Wow. Two different perspectives. Choki had to manage a lot of talent and expectation. Mm. And so Coach Bradley, I've done both of these, and so I have an appreciation for both. I don't know if I can say, this is going to be a little bit of a politically correct question, because I have such respect for both men and I know what they did. But Coach Scott Spittler, in my opinion, with him coming back this season with with graduating one of the best running backs in school history.
In state history.
In state history. I mean, we talked about that coming in, 6,900 yards rushing, whatever it may have been, maybe even over 7,000. I can't remember exactly what the numbers were. But for him to get this group to be as high as they were, as they were in their region, no conference championship, just playing ball halfway around the state half the time, and getting his group, ready to go each and every week with a lack of depth as well. I mean, you're looking at a roster of 20, maybe 30-some guys. I think what he did was nothing short of awesome.
You agree, Coach, or you think Choki maybe had a better?
I really think, and I respect what Coach Spittler was able to do this year. He done an awesome job with that program. That being said, when I look at the job Choki has done, I look at it from a little bit different perspective. Being a former Mansfield coach, there are always high expectations. But the truth of the matter is, this group, they had some talented kids, but Angelo Gross he developed into a star. He didn't step on the field as a star. He developed into a star. And what Choki had to do this year was understand when to let his leaders lead and when to take charge, and what he managed that team to perfection, in my view. When I watched them practice and play, they're the most physical team that I've watched, but yet when you watch them practice, they don't have to bang heads all practice long. They practice very smartly because, they don't have a whole lot of depth. But the way Coach Bradley managed that team, and if you watch him on Friday nights, on game nights, he gets the maximum out of every single kid on that field because he expects it. And the talent is always there. But to get them to play hard, and then what they do better than they have in years, execute. Now that has a lot to do with the players, but this team execute like no other team I've seen. And I had Larry Phillips ask me after one of the games, he said, is this team better than the 2013 team that went undefeated? And at that time, it was early in the season, I said, well, I don't know, it's yet to be seen. But I look at the way this team executes, and I say, absolutely, hands down, I believe so. Because when it's time to make a play, third down, offense and defense, they execute and make that play. And I'm just so impressed with that. And that goes directly back to the coaching, in my view.
What do you think, Curt? Who deserves the most credit for their coaching job?
I wouldn't want to have to pick one of them. I certainly wouldn't want to have to coach against one of them. I think for Scott at Lucas, last year they went through Region 27, which is kind of a Southeast Ohio region. They're through Region 25 this year, which is Youngstown. And certainly no disrespect to Region 27 in Southeast Ohio, but the level of football that they're encountering in the playoffs this year is a lot stiffer, the competition is, than it was maybe last year. I know Trimble beat Lucas last year in the regional final and played for a state championship. Still, I think the depth in the Youngstown area is better. And Choki, I've known Choki for years, and that's an awful lot of egos, I would imagine. You got all those Division I guys or potential Division I guys. I mean, you can't coach those guys the exact same as you would everyone else. And, you know, he has walked that line, and he's done an admirable job.
Right.
Yeah, obviously both guys. You can't really pick, a clear-cut favorite in this.
Well,
But
and like you said, they're both within their districts were Coach of the Year, and rightfully so. Both of them earned that, and the product was on the field. You're able to see it every Friday night.
Right.
yeah, I see Chokey more for the Tigers as like a father figure. Like the other day at practice, he had to go shuttle so many kids in there. Just the way that he conducts himself is just different. I guess just different environments. Whereas Scott Spittler, I feel like he has a little bit more of a culture around the team. Where, damn it, if you're going to play Lucas football, you're going to be hard-nosed. You're going to want to hit. You don't want to wear pads if we have the option out there. That's just what I see.
Get the neck roll, and here we go.
So, no clear-cut winner. But if I had to pick just one dude, just given what you said with the graduation of Jeb Grover, and they had some good linemen too that they had to part. When you're a town of like 800 people and you lose like one of the best kids in the history of the state, you don't think you're going to replace that. But guess what? Tommy Zurzel went for like 250 and 5 touchdowns last week, so they did kind of replace it. They've had other kids step up, so for Scott Spittler to be able to get his team back to a regional championship against, like you said, a tough region, and who knows? They may even get a couple of more steps further because they beat 5 teams this year. You were almost always playing up when you're Lucas. You can't really play down.
And piggyback, and I'll tell you what, senior high was the class of the area, no doubt about it. I mean, just athletes, size, strength, the whole 9 yards. I don't think there's anybody else in Richland County that would have wanted to play Lucas. Pick your team: Shelby, Clear Fork, Lexington, Ontario. Crestview. I'm just telling you right now, I don't think anybody wants to play Lucas. I'm
that would have been an interesting schedule in all Richland County league for them, for Lucas, and they can do it.
I think the proof is in the scheduling. I mean, all those teams could schedule Lucas.
Right.
None of them want to have anything to do with Lucas.
Yep, and LCC came. It was a great game back and forth, but that kid had over 500 all-purpose yards, 14-7, and Lucas had the ball with a chance to go tie that baby up late.
Right.
All right, so let's talk about their matchups then. Lucas and Senior High both, of course, are going to be playing this weekend in Week 13. Which team do you feel like has the better shot at the Final Four? The number 2 Cubs going against Cuyahoga Heights, the number 1 seed out there, or the number 2 Tigers in a rematch against Sandusky, a team that they beat in a pretty good game back in Week 5. Erik, the floor is yours.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to go with the TY Tigers this time. I know when we finished up, I can't remember if we did it together Week 9 or Week 10 when you were celebrating your anniversary.
Right.
But I on a scale from 1 to 10, I said 10 being extremely confident. I had the Cubs.
Right.
Well, that Cuyahoga Falls team or Cuyahoga Heights team is really, really good. The Cubbies can win this. There's no doubt about it. But if you're asking me my confidence points right now with the matchup, I think Sandusky is much improved.
Right.
But I think the TY Tigers are even that much more improved because I think their defense has just continued to be what their defense is. And I think that the piece that they had to have go from a B+ to an A, it's done that, the offense. And so that's why I give the Tigers a little bit more of an edge. But I have confidence points in both, but I would pick the TY Tigers with my ultimate confidence.
Yeah, I think I have to go with Mansfield too, only because when we saw the game before, Mansfield was, they were different. They were still growing offensively, but one thing that they had that no other team that they played this year had other than Worcester was that interior presence that Curt talked about. No team they played this year, other than maybe Worcester, was able to match up on the interior line. So when I watched the game against Sandusky, there wasn't we didn't execute very well offensively. But one thing that happened was Mansfield controlled the line of scrimmage, and I don't see that changing for this week. Sandusky's going to have a great running game. They're going to have an improved quarterback play.
Right.
But at the end of the day, this part of the year is all about your interior linemen, and the advantage to me is clearly with the Tigers this week.
Yeah, agreed. They that Senior High team, again, like I said earlier, I mean, defensively in the interior of that line, it's just hard to move the ball against them. And the big thing that struck me the first time they played Sandusky and Norwalk was the penalty yardage.
Right.
Norwalk's offensive lineman and Sandusky's offensive lineman, they couldn't stay in front of the Senior High defensive lineman. Right. So both those teams ended up with 5 or 6 holding penalties. And those are killers. I mean, you go from, Terry and Stewart with a 12-yard run to 10 yards back from the spot of the foul. Right. So, I mean, those are all killers. You know, and if they don't get that cleaned up, it could be a long night for the Streaks.
And you don't typically see a running back have 123 yards and a touchdown and you say you was really held in check. But the kid that Sandusky had, that's what Mansfield Senior did to them the first time.
Right.
And he broke one, the third play from scrimmage, where you were kind of scratching your head like, man, it might be one of these kind of nights.
And Bob, I'm talking like 30 yards the rest of the night, something like that. I mean, it was that defensive performance was unbelievable. If you'd have told me going into that game he was going to be under 150, 175, I don't know about that. Because he's that good, and that tells you how good the TY Tiger defense is.
So I'm going to jump on board. I think we're going to go 4 for 4 with the Tigers. Probably got the better chance to get by, and obviously because the competition with Lucas, I think probably is just a little bit more stiff as well.
It's tough.
Even though Sandusky is no slouch. Anybody want to give me a bold prediction for this weekend? Is that something that we tried this season, or we just want to steer clear of that tonight? We embarrass ourselves enough.
I'm predicting what now?
Bold prediction.
Bold prediction.
You know, Cuyahoga Heights is small school royalty. They are a state semifinal team last year. They were in the state championship games the 2 years before that. But you know, maybe just maybe it's the Cubs' year. You know, let's go with that.
I mean, because Lucas probably gets to the playoffs after the regular season schedule they played, and they're like, man, these teams are easy. You know what I mean? They only have 30 kids on the roster just like us now instead of 65. So I think you could be on to something, Curt. All right, that's a look at the playoffs and what we got with a couple of teams coming up. Let's take a look back at the regular season now. We had the top 5 plays for you guys every single week. We're going to spin back the winner from all 10 weeks, show you all the top highlights from the 2019 season. Let's start we should start week 1, Ontario at Lexington, and look at that, a tip to himself. It's the Warriors outside linebacker Avery Hooks, 48-yard pick 6. Ontario did not get the win, but they got the play of the week. Pretty impressive, boys. Look at that.
You know, like I said, turnovers are a killer, and they make for big plays for the defense. Even worse when they turn into scores for your offense. So great play by the Ontario Warriors that time.
More Lexington in week 2. They're at Shelby, the Minutemen. It's a 73-yard halfback pass. Hayden Berry hooking up with Alex Green, and nobody, and I mean nobody, maybe even the whole state, can catch that kid in the open field. When he gets running in a straight line, he's gone.
Yeah, there's a reason the University of Toledo wants him. A little tomfoolery to start this game. I believe this was their first play from scrimmage, if I remember correctly. So for them to be able to execute this play, that's obviously a fresh Hayden Berry as well. So the Minutemen, that was probably one of the few times they got to celebrate, but that was a nice-looking play there.
More Lexington, 3 weeks in a row, Clear Fork at Lex, and look at the one-handed snag by the Colts, Jackson Meyer. Take one more look here, fellas, 35 yards on this. Who needs the left hand when you can just use the right?
You know, the Clear Fork Colts are, I mean, I think it might be a well-kept secret. There's an awful lot of athleticism down in the valley.
Yeah, they got some dudes. Troy Christian at Lucas. This was the Cubs running back, the junior Ethan Sauter, 48-yard touchdown run. When you watch this one more time in slow motion, it's like, where does the football go? They completely confuse you. And then there goes Sauter. He's gone. They have a little bit of just ball movement in the backfield, and that's a lot of times that they can spring their runs. Certainly worked on that one right there. Week 5, Pleasant at Shelby. Whippets, Blaine Bowman, the sophomore, going to get loose. 62-yard touchdown reception. And you got to go say what's up to the students, right?
Yeah, Blaine had a heck of a sophomore year. That was a good job by McGuire Robert there, keeping the play open. Blaine's going to have a lot of plays like this over the next 2 years.
That's 62 yards, and that's not even nearly his longest one of the year. He had a real long one in the playoff game.
Next one, we're going to do East Knox at Northmore. Both teams were undefeated at the time, but the Bulldogs' Caleb Golowitz was like, nah, dude, we'll take the goose egg in the loss column. 57 yards. He's going to take this thing all the way into the end zone. And when we run it back again, it looks like he's bottled up, but some kids are just too special to get tackled.
That's great vision that time by Gowitz. He was able to make this cut right here. As you see, this cut right here shows his vision of the whole field. And now he's just going to turn on the speed and beat everybody to the end zone.
Stiff arming his own guy, Brian. Get out of the way.
By any means necessary to get those 6 points. Howard, Ohio, rising up right there on that play. We'll move on to week 7 now. It's Ontario at Clear Fork, and we talked about, well, the guys that the Colts got, Curt. This one's Devin Freeman, just a sophomore. He shakes loose, 83-yard touchdown run. This was kind of in garbage time, but he stepped up, he got his time, and he made it count.
Yeah, look at that move right there. I mean, he sees the field after talking about it. I mean, that's Goes a long way, that vision right
And look
there.
at the right hand. It's like he's swimming. You know what I mean? Like, you can always tell fast players when they get that hand moving in that motion.
Hey, an entire offseason for the Colts, man. Look for them to be back in the playoffs again next year.
This is Mansfield at Worcester. In my opinion, this is the play of the year that I covered. Effie's having a heart attack over here watching this thing. It's Micah McKee, game-winning 21-yard reception. This clinched the OCC championship. Tigers could have won the game with a stop.
I think the evidence might suggest that maybe he was out of balance with
Yeah,
that
it was
right.
a close call. But you know what, though, Effie? We have solace, buddy, because the TY Tigers are still playing this week.
Yeah, I talked to
Absolutely.
Cherokee after that game, and he said if there's a good loss, that was it, because they've been refocused since then.
Week 9, Harding at Clear Fork, and once again, Jackson Meyer making the list. 39 yards here on the touchdown reception. Just a lot of dudes out there that they can put on the perimeter for the Colts.
Yeah, when you got athletes that you can put all over the field and you got a solid running game, these types of big plays are going to be available. This team's got to play some man coverage, and you know they have great athletes. This deep ball pass was a great example.
Clear Fork at Shelby in Week 10, our last play. And again, it's the Colts. It's Gabe Glauser, a new name, 81 yards. As he shakes loose and he's gone, man, they got some speed too out there in the valley.
Yeah, I think they had like 29 guys or something like that run under, or at least a 4.9 or under. So in the valley, there's plenty of speed.
So that's the top 10 plays of the season. According to you, the fans, we're going to have a vote. You tell us what the top play was from 2019. So those were the top plays from the 2019 season. Now let's talk about the top individual players on our first ever All-OH.Report football team. I'm very excited about this, guys, and I didn't want to go super deep into this. We'll just talk about 3 players on offense, 3 players on defense, a couple of skill guys, and then a big kid for each side of the ball. Erik, we'll start with you. Your quarterback of the year in the area is...
You know what? Very tough. Very tough. There were a lot of guys. Sal, loved the guy from Heilman from Ashland, but I did end up going with Cam Todd. I think Cam Todd separated himself this year. I think he was the perfect fit for Mansfield Senior. I agree with Choke. I think he's a scholarship kid at some level. I think that his upside, his ceiling is yet to be reached. So the yardage, and I love the efficiency. Very rarely ever turned the ball over and was completing right around 70% of his passes. I don't think you can overlook that. He knows how to get his athletes the ball. Cam Todd's my guy.
You know, I got to agree with that. Cam Todd, and not just because of how he's playing now, but his growth throughout the season. And I'm not just, you know, when you look at the stats, they're impressive, but I watch him technically, and technically he has become much better. His passing motion is much more fluent. He gets rid of the ball a lot quicker. He gets it out faster, and that is what this team needs. Get the ball in the hands of the playmakers as soon as possible and let them make plays. And his leadership ability is what has set this offense apart from everybody. And I'm impressed with Cam and the way he's playing, his mechanics, his leadership. Every part of his quarterback play has just grown from beginning to end.
And there's no denying the leadership. That's one thing that Chokey told me yesterday when I talked to him, is that Cam Todd just leads a little bit different than any kid that he has ever had. So I thought that was a really awesome testimony to the type of player that Cam Todd is.
Sure.
But I'm actually going to go with Brennan South of Clear Fork on this, because he's been in a dual quarterback system the last couple of years. They thought they were going to do that again, and Brady Tedrow ended up with a hamstring injury. So Brennan South had to take over all the snaps, and I think he stood up to the occasion. 2,300 yards through the air, 27 touchdowns, 5 INTs, and then 11 touchdowns on the ground and 550 yards. And he looks like he's not that shifty of a guy, not that fast. He's kind of slight build, but at the end of the day, you look at his numbers, and Brennan South came through every single week for the Clear Fork Colts. So I was impressed with him, even though in terms of leadership and what Cam Todd did for the Tigers, you cannot overlook that.
While playing defense.
Right, that's a good call.
And being maybe the best defensive player that they had.
And when you look at what those two guys have in common, I think that those are probably two of the smartest football players in Central Ohio. Man. Those guys don't make bad decisions. I don't know what Brennan's completion percentage was that was up there, but
63%.
Cam could complete, 72% of his passes. I mean, that's, we talked about it before. You weren't a 72% completion guy, but I mean, that's stunning, really.
Yeah.
I mean,
They didn't realize it.
They didn't want to.
All right, guys. What about your top skill kid on offense of the season? We'll let you go first, Effie.
Well, you know, my top skill kid, you know, again, comes from the Tigers, and Flickinger, Terrence Flickinger brought something to the Tiger attack that I don't think they had in such a long time. a steady-handed running back, and he carried the load. Now he's a slight kid, he's a small guy, but he was a workhorse for them, and he emerged. They rotate some guys in, but he emerged as the workhorse for this team. And whenever they played and the passing game wasn't going well, and we were doing some things offensively that just weren't working, they could turn the ball and hand the ball to him, and he would always get positive yardage, and then he'd break off for a big play. I was really impressed with his play, and I really thought he was one of the best, if not the best, skilled player in terms of his efficiency and consistency throughout the whole year.
I think he stood out on tape when you watch him, the way that he utilizes his blocks when he gets to the second level.
Yeah.
He's pretty special at setting them up. You would see he would do like the stutter step, or he would wait, and then he has linemen that are able to get out in space and create some openings.
Once he learned, and this happens with running backs, you run a zone blocking system or you run a man blocking system, but once as a running back you learn those systems and the blocking schemes, it makes you such a better runner because you know how each guy is going to block, which blocking angle is going to happen, and where you can make cuts. And he got great, not good, he got great at that by this time of the year.
All right, so me and Erik, we talked before the show, and we shared who we were going to pick. So we're going to talk about this kid together. Just unbelievable numbers. Isaiah Alseb, the Galleon senior wide receiver, just like video game stuff from him.
Yeah, I just thought that he was so explosive the entire year. I think the whole reason Galleon was in the running for the league title was because of him and his quarterback, his companion there at quarterback. But Isaiah is very, very special. I've seen him play basketball. He's phenomenal on a basketball floor. But he brings that same passion, energy, and aggression to a football field. He's really, really special. In my opinion, scholarship athlete, some way, shape, or form. He's just too good of an athlete. But on the edge, it's hard. Sometimes we don't think about, think of skilled guys, a quarterback oftentimes, or we go with a running back or something like that. For him to be able to, only be able to affect the game, maybe at the most 7 to 12 times a game as far as through the air. He made every one of those count, as well as in the special teams and stuff like that. I just thought he was a difference maker for them all year. He was something you could not account for, even though you tried to account for him.
2 years in a row now, he's gone over 1,000 yards. I mean,
incredible.
That's unheard of around here.
Right.
And he lined up at quarterback a lot for them. He would line up at running back too. He'd take some of the jet sweeps. He had 5 rushing touchdowns on the season, over 1,000 yards, actually over 1,215 receiving touchdowns through the air. Wow. I remember I had 5 one year, and I still brag about it today. I'm very proud of that number. So what Isaiah Alseb did from the wide receiver position was pretty awesome.
Absolutely.
All right, let's talk about the big guys because they need some loving too. Who's your offensive lineman of the year? For me, I went to Shelby with this one. I went Zach Hart. Zach Hart's had a great year. He's a center for them. He calls all of their fronts. He gets everything set up. He was an all-district kid. I believe he's a first-team all-district kid as well. He's probably going to be an all-state kid. But to be able to go up to center and know that you're going to be able to you got a guy that can get your line set up, which controls when you make those calls, odd, evens, those things. He's getting everybody on the right page as far as blocking schemes. Virtually didn't have a bad snap in 2 years worth of starts. Very physically imposing. He was also their weight room lifter of the year this year. I mean, just a kid that you're going to rally behind. These are tough things too because there's a whole bunch of players that could be selected for this. But I do think Zach Hart is one heck of a football player. You got it.
Well, I'm going to break the rules a little bit, Brian, and I'm going to say instead of one player, I'm going to pick the entire Lucas Cubs offensive line. If you think about it, what other group controls the entire game more than the Lucas Cubs offensive line? I mean, they control the game. They control time of possession because they can control the line of scrimmage. Defensively, a team, we saw a team tap out against them, and probably wasn't the only one this year that tapped out against the Lucas Cubs. And their offensive line is their identity because of the fact that they can run the ball. Anytime that I tell you exactly what I'm going to do and I do it and I still win, that tells you that your offensive line are a bunch of studs. And I don't even want to pick one of them. I got to give that award to the entire offensive line.
I was thinking pretty much along the same lines as you, but fortunately for me, I delivered shirts to every school in Richland County a couple of days ago, and I got to talk to Scott Spittler, so I asked him, which of your linemen do you think had the best season? And he told me the Blake Kaufman to him stood out.
Right.
So I'm going to go ahead and just give it to that kid, their left tackle. Obviously, when you run for over 3,000 yards, you're doing something right, at the high school level. The way that they were able to not throw a pass last week and then still dominate Aquinas. Like, I can't really get
playoff
over
game,
that
that's
statistic.
Right.
So
when you know it's coming, you still can't stop it.
that like old Larry Bird stuff. He's telling you he's going to shoot a jumper from the corner, but guess what?
Right.
You still aren't going to stop it. So we'll give it to Blake Hoffman and then the entire Lucas Cub front. All right, let's talk about the defensive side of the ball, and since I know that this always gets your juices flowing, Effie, we'll let you start. Who is one of your top skill guys of the year on defense?
One of my top skill guys, it's interesting because you picked him as your offensive player of the year. I picked him as one of my defensive picks was Brennan South from Clear Fork. And I think, even though I know defensively, he may not have the numbers, but I was so impressed with the fact that the load that he carried offensively, and then to turn around and be the guy defensively. He was probably their best defensive player, if not one of the best in the area. That was impressive to watch him make play after play. I believe we had a game where he made a huge pick at the end of the game that really sealed the game for him. He came up and defensed the run like a linebacker from a defensive back position. I thought I was really impressed with his overall play. And I really can't call him a defensive back because he played everywhere for the Colts this year. Great job by Brennan South this year as a defensive player.
For me, it was clear cut. I mean, this guy, I feel like he's the best player in North Central Ohio. He's one of the best players in the state. He's a Mr. Football candidate. I couldn't go with anybody but Angelo Gross. He is an 18. I was a head coach for 6, coach for 18 years, and I'm talking coaching in Columbus, playing in the OCC down there. Angelo Gross as good as I've ever seen. You're talking 5'11", 195 pounds, and when he hits you, he doesn't hit. He blows through you. He runs through your soul. I mean, he's unbelievable. And I'll be honest with you, Michigan State, in my opinion, is getting an absolute diamond. If I had a media vote for Mr. Football, I would have to see some other guys. I wouldn't want to be an ignorant voter, but he would be tough to beat. His leadership by example is unbelievable. He's always one of the first guys out early because you can watch him warm up. We're all there early enough. He's always out there like catching balls. He gets himself ready to go. I mean, it's not screw around time. It's football. He comes to the office. That's his office. That's his sanctuary. He goes there with the right mentality. And I'm sad because we're losing him. You know what I mean? Like, we're not going to be able to watch this kid play. And I think you could have put him on the offensive skill as well.
Oh, absolutely.
But I had to go defense because I know that's what he's going to do. And I'm telling you right now, man, you mark my words, when he goes to Michigan State and he plays in that quarters defense, he is going to be lights out. I saw him hit that kid from Bay, their running back, at the line of scrimmage from 8 yards deep. And that kid got up, wobbled to the sidelines to never be seen again. And I'm serious. I was just like, I don't know if I've ever seen that from it. And that's what you got to do in quarters. And that's why Michigan State's a perfect fit for Angelo Gross.
The good news is we get to look at his younger brother for the next couple of years.
Right.
Davion, if you've seen him, he's built differently than Angelo, but I think he's going to be longer and he's going to be every bit as athletic.
He's special. He is special.
And you could almost put Avion as like a fringe player on this.
No,
type
I
of
agree.
list. He had a pretty good season too.
Absolutely.
But Angelo, man, I mean the numbers speak for themselves. So over 100 tackles, and they list him at safety, but I feel like he plays more of a hybrid outside linebacker.
Sure.
16 tackles for loss, like a couple of fumbles that he caused. And
Dude,
then, like
coming
you said,
from 8 to 10 yards, that's what I'm saying. He is a creature, man.
and watch being down on the sideline when he hits somebody, exactly what you just said. You can hear like the breath go out of him. You know what I mean? Like Angelo Gross can pop.
When I coached on the staff when Jamario O'Neal was playing safety for us and he was an Ohio State commit, at first he was just a track guy, but his sophomore year at one point, I remember the first time he came up and he hit a guy like a man, and I'm like, to me that changed everything, and that's when Ohio State said, he's our guy. And I watched Angelo play that way. It's just a difference. When you see a guy, it's one thing to be out there and you're faster than everybody and you make plays, but he's got the physicalness. And even when he runs the football, he runs with a physicality that guys don't want to tackle the kid. They don't want to tackle him. So he's certainly a special kid.
I think it was against Toledo Rogers.
Yes.
He came up and hit the guy, and it's like the guy blew up.
Right.
I mean,
Exactly.
he came out of his pads almost. And Angelo absolutely has that special, it factor.
All right, fellas, let's go to the interior now. Let's talk about the top defensive lineman. Who stood out to you this year, Mr. James?
Anthony Hawkins from Mansfield Senior we talk about kids being unblockable, and Anthony Hawkins is a guy that either he is in the backfield or he's being held pretty much on every play. He's a dynamite athlete, obviously a Division I recruit. and I thought he controlled games from the interior line spot and not being able to be blocked. And plus, he's got the athleticism that they could put him in different places on the D line, and that was special. And he's such a team guy that he could easily have a ton of sacks, but he stays within the coach's program, and he makes sure he takes care of his responsibility. But he just dominates his offensive opponent, and I couldn't think of anybody better on the interior D line than Anthony Hawkins.
It's pick your poison with that Mansfield Senior defensive line.
Yeah.
Clay Caudell was great, and a guy who I don't think gets a lot of publicity is Donovan Haney. That kid he gets a defensive end,
Absolutely.
and I think he may lead him in sacks. He's done a really good job for him this year.
Absolutely.
And for me, obviously, I went with Hawkins as well. How could you not? I mean, the interior-wise, there's nobody better in the area. And then for me, I also went. I had a because I went on the edge too. Because it's almost like two different positions when you're playing out wide. I had to go Merrick Albert. I mean, tied a school record, 15 sacks. You were telling us earlier, 21 tackles for loss. Virtually unblockable. I mean, if you were taking your life into your own hands in pass situations with number one out there running around. So, Merrick Albert, co-defensive, or at least I think he was either co or was defensive player of the year in the district there. So I had to go with those two guys together.
Anthony Hawkins, of course, makes my list too. 55 tackles as an interior lineman is good. And then the way that they use him too, like you said, it opened up for guys like Clay Caudell, who I think had double-digit sacks, even though he missed a few games. And then, some of the other pieces that the Tigers had. But Anthony Hawkins, the ultimate team player, he was awesome to watch, and he manhandled people too. So that always sticks out to you when you watch it. And then I did the same thing as you were. We're cheaters in the same regard, Coach. I got Merrick Albert on the list too, because anytime I just watched them with my own eyes have 6 sacks in one game, and I can't unsee that. I haven't watched one player on the defensive line ever have that type of game, what he did, and I don't know that I ever will again. So Merrick Albert and Anthony Hawkins, I put them right there, 1A and 1B. Finally, the linebacker spot. Who stood out to you, gentlemen? Who'd you like?
I'll take it to start. If I had two again, I went with Terrence Flickinger for that because I thought he was incredible. He is so disciplined, trusting his reads. So week to week, your reads are going to change as well. Sometimes it's going to be those guards. Sometimes you might cross key or cross read. Depends on the defense and what the offense is doing that week. He was phenomenal every single week, and he's very quick for the ball. The same thing that makes him a great running back, his vision and his ability to read and react. The exact same thing that makes him an elite linebacker. I believe that once again, I think he was another defensive guy who was I think he was first team all district as a linebacker, I think. I'm not 100%, but I feel pretty good with that. And then I had to go to Lucas for my next guy. Tristan Arnold, what a year. Just flat out dominated people at that level. And the great thing is, he's a pound guy. He's going to fill, and he's going to not only spill it, but a lot of times guys at that level, because I think he's a guy that could play for a lot of big schools in the area. And I think he'd be a guy that would actually get a lot more attention if he wasn't doing those team things that we talk about. So two great football players there. Those were my two selections.
You guys talked about Angelo Gross as a defensive back. I picked him as a linebacker only because I see the way the Tigers scheme defensively. So much of it is about they spill the play to him.
Right.
They spill the play to him, knowing that he's going to come up and make that big hit, make that big play. So that gives them the opportunity to do so much more flexibility to run games on the inside. They can do a lot more things scheme-wise defensively because they got an extra linebacker coming from 8 to 12 yards away that can play downhill. And I was super impressed with his physicality at the point of attack and how he was a guy that you can count on to make that defensive play. So Angelo Gross is my guy.
I'm with you, man. He could play linebacker and kind of does in that scheme, so I will accept that.
Going over into Ashland County, Hillsdale was in the second round of the playoffs largely because of their defense, and they got two really good interior linebackers, Tom Williams' son, and Briar Funk. Briar Funk is the school's career tackles leader. He's just keeping that warm for a year because Ty's going to break it next year. They advanced to the second round and lost in the second round 7-0, and that's they did that because of their defense.
Yeah, the total defensive game against Cary actually too. That was a wild game.
Yeah, it was about 46 minutes of scoreless football until Cary scored in the last couple minutes there.
Well, that's the first ever All-OH Report football team, so appreciate you guys coming on here, talking a little pigskin with me, and as we move into Week 13, still a couple of teams here in the area that still got the juice flowing, including those TY Tigers and the Lucas Cubs, and of course another shout out to East Knox. Thanks for finding us, glad to get a whole new fan base. So I'm Brian Skowronski for my guy Erik Will, Effie James, and Curt Conrad. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you at a playoff game near you.